guys think that national fear or times of war and that kind of stuff put pressure on like a nation's commitment to the rule of law?
I think that times of war can put pressure on the nation's commitment to rule of law. For example, during the Civil War, when Abraham Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus, it was getting rid of that rule of law and the procedural due process rights that those people had during the time of war.
A more recent example is the war between Israel and Hamas, and is putting pressure on the U.S. government to take action and to choose or pick a side to support by the people, which is not subject them to rule of law as you're choosing one side over the other instead of treating them equally.
Another example of this would be during World War II when Franklin Delano Roosevelt served 3 terms instead of the usual 2 terms.
And Hamilton states that we should create constitutional change if there were to be for a series of important events such as war, which could create constitutional change. And yeah.
You folks mentioned fundamental laws versus laws that are not fundamental. Can you kind of tell us what the difference is and then maybe provide some examples of that?
Fundamental laws are the ones that we can see in the Bill of Rights of the Constitution. These laws were what the framers had intended America to have, and those are providing the basis for decisions. The First Amendment right protects the freedom of speech, and the freedom of speech helps protect the right to protest and speak up against the government. An example of a type of protest is litigation, and an example of litigation is for when the students for fair admission sued Harvard and North Carolina in order to end affirmative action, and eventually the Supreme Court voted against affirmative action.
Another example of litigation that has been used in United States history is when the NAACP supported the Brown versus the Board of Education case.
An example of us using our fundamental rights and Bill of Rights would also be the Second Amendment, where we can see that we are using arms if we need it to protect ourselves.
Fundamental laws apply to everybody in the United States, not just United States citizens, so it's the Bill of Rights, which protects everybody in this regard. Another example of a protest is the Stonewall Inn riots that actually created constitutional change by passing the Equality Act in 2015, protecting discrimination against LGBTQ people.
Are there barriers to access to the justice system, and how does that impact accountability?
I think one of the barriers that impacts the justice system can be whether or not you have more money or more wealth. For example, in the People of California versus O.J. Simpson, he was a celebrity, and so he could afford better lawyers, and they could frame his argument in a way that put him in a better position. And people who are immigrating over or need lawyers for small cases but do not have enough money and have to deal with the ones that they are provided with, they don't have enough. They don't provide as well of a case as better, more expensive lawyers.
Do you think, or how do you think the majority in a nation benefits by protecting, through rule of law, the minorities in the nation? How does the majority benefit by protecting, the rights basically of the minority in the nation?
Protecting the minority in the United States benefits the whole because it makes the United States feel more unified as a country, and it makes everyone feel equal under the law, under the rule of law.
As Martin Luther King Jr. said in his letter from Birmingham jail, he stated that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and I believe that is true. And if minorities are receiving this injustice, then it affects justice for the majority.
Rule of law is equal protection under the laws, so even though if you're poorer than other people, the president and any people have to follow the same rules.
To dovetail off that question, what are some safeguards in the American rule of law to protect minorities? And
One example that protects minorities under the rule of law is the 14th Amendment.
Another example of protections is the Electoral College to make sure everybody's voices get heard.
As well as protesting with our First Amendment to make sure that we can be heard throughout minorities.
Supreme Court cases can be used to help represent the minority. For example, Anna Bergefell versus Hodges in 2016, it protected the right to same-sex marriage federally and affected the minority of this.
What are some of the checks and balances overall in our system?
One form of checks and balances in our United States is impeachment, and the House of Representatives brings up an accusation of wrongdoings against the government official, and then it is moved to the House to vote on the removal of office of this government official.
Another example would be judicial review. The judiciary receives laws and sees if they're unconstitutional, and that just protects the legislative branch from getting too much power.
In Federalist 42, Madison states that our federal government should have a limited government in order to check that we are respecting our states.
I have a funny feeling, oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Can I finish my statement?
Since you uttered some sound.
Another check of the government is presidential vetoes. So if a legislature passes a bill that the president doesn't necessarily agree with, he can veto it and it will be done.
Okay, this is when we clap for you.